Hello everyone and welcome to AndyDavo's Guide to Black Orcs in Blood Bowl 3. In this video I'm going to cover the following topics. I'll have an introduction to the players that make up the team, and so we can look at how they work both individually and collectively. We're going to look at how to level the team and make an effective team pitch side. We're going to look at some starting optimal rosters, what inducements you should be considering if you get any, and finally offensive and defensive setups with some reasoning and explanation. Now, why should you be taking Black Orcs and what are they? For me, Black Orcs are a street brawler of a team. They focus mostly on fighting and fouling, with considerations for ball handling coming a distant second on their priorities list. They comprise of a troll and 6 Black Orcs, and they can form a formidable front line, both with high strength and high armour. They've even got some interesting new starting skills. In addition, we've got some Goblin Bruiser linemen who are very cheap, and they excel both at fouling and also they're acceptable ball carriers. As such, I think you can characterise the Black Orc team with strengths and weaknesses. Their strengths are, they've got one of the highest strengths in Blood Bowl as a front line, with 6 strength 4 players and a strength 5. They're also incredibly well armoured. The Goblin players are very cheap, very expendable, and also their bribes are half price as a special ability for them. Unfortunately, they also come with some weaknesses. The Black Orcs are very slow, the Goblins are fragile and easily killed, and the team can easily be outpositioned overall. Let's go and have a look at the team, the players individually, and see how we would level them up. Okay, before we look at the players and how to progress them, I think it's worth just covering off how the level of experience in Blood Bowl 3 has altered against older versions of the game. In Blood Bowl 3, the level up process, you can now select from normal skills, double skills, and statistics when leveling, just they cost different amounts of star player points. You can also random your level ups, and they cost less than a chosen skill for a player, but of course what you're getting is pot luck. Sometimes they synergize really well, and sometimes they're just flat terrible. I think you can characterize this by just saying they're probably a bit of fun, rather than it's an optimal strategy in almost all cases. So we're going to have a quick look at the Black Orc roster themselves, the first of which is the Trained Troll. This chap here, it is a trained troll, so I think the most important thing to think about here is Loner 3+ rather than Loner 4+ in the previous game. And it has also got a brand new skill called Projectile Vomit. This skill replaces blocking and is a bit like the stab skill from Blood Bowl 2, in as much as it's almost a no risk action. Instead of throwing block dice where you could turn over, you now throw a d6. On a roll of 1, the player actually vomits on himself, and in a roll of a 2+, the player now vomits on the opposition, and in exactly the same way as a stab skill works, you're making an armor roll and then potentially an injury roll if you do that. For me, the best way you could possibly level a troll up is to take a normal skill and just give it guard. If you do get a second normal skill, Stand Firm's a great skill, and if you want to start saving up for doubles, then Block, Pro and Defensive are all great skills. I would probably go guard, block, Stand Firm, Pro, and then really want to stop at that point. I don't think you want to random skills because there's too many bad skills for a troll, and in terms of stats, there's no good stats to save up for. So that, for me, covers the troll. Now let's go and look at the actual reason to play Black Orcs, which are the Black Orcs themselves. They come with 2 skills straight out the gate. Grab, if you've played Blood Bowl 2, you'll recognise this, and it actually counteracts Sidestep and lets you put players in a square that you want to control. And then there is a brand new skill to Blood Bowl 3, which is this one here, which is Brawler, which means on a block action, but not a blitz, the player can re-roll a both down result. So it's helping you not turn over and mitigates for not having block. Now the way I would level these players is I would lean into the grab skill and the idea that they are a fouling team. So guard now assists with fouling. So for me, I would go with at least 4 of these players being support players. Guard, Stand Firm, and then block. You do want one player that's a killer, so I think at that point I would start with block, then go into Mighty Blow and tackle. You still need guard, so take guard, and then round that player out with some Juggernaut. If you do want to save up for some doubles, then I recommend only one skill, which is defensive, and I think you probably on a mature Black Orc team are looking to have maybe 2 or 3 defensive players. You don't need all 6, but I would take at least 2. Statistics, because they're so slow at movement 4, and their armor value is already 9. I don't think you need to be looking at any of the statistics, and again, I really would avoid randoming unless you just want to have a bit of fun with the team, or have got a lot of time to fire the players that get randoms that don't suit them. For example, you could get a Black Orc with strong arm. And the final player type we're going to look at is the Goblin. The Goblins have two main functions in this team. One, and probably the most important function, is actually their fouling. So you're looking to try and build a Goblin which takes Sneaky Git as its first level up. At that point I would then save for a double skill and take Dirty Player, and then you've got a Dirty Player Sneaky Git which is being assisted with probably 6 or 7 guard, and that is actually the damage output of this team and also the reason to play it. You do need at least one ball carrier, and because they're only armor AV8+, they will die, so I recommend actually carrying 2 ball carriers. One would save up for a statistic upgrade because movement's great, agility's great, I'm looking to pick either of those, and then the other one just takes Sure Hands as a double skill so that you can reliably save rerolls for the important stuff, which is fighting. So that for me covers off the 3 players. Now let's go and have a quick look at how you would actually build a roster. Okay, before we dive into roster building, we need to cover a change in this rule set that's the difference between the old fan factor and the new fan factor and how it relates to your winnings rolls. The winnings roll is now based on the following calculation. At the start of the match, each coach rolls a d3 and then adds their dedicated fans to determine the fan factor for the match. The combined fan factor of both teams then goes in to determine the total fan attendance, and your team winning roll is half the fan attendance plus 10k effectively for each touchdown your team scored. Broadly, this means that you are splitting what you put into your dedicated fans, which cost 10k, with your opponent, which means you're making 5k profit per game. After 2 games you've broken even, and then after the 3rd game you're making a profit. I think whether you take dedicated fans based entirely on what type of competition you're going into, in a league setting I think you should very heavily go into dedicated fans. In a matchmaking environment you might want to consider it. It depends a little bit on whether you can get a much better team out of the gate, and in a resurrection format you almost certainly want to avoid all dedicated fans because they don't do anything other than generate money. It is also worth noting that dedicated fans, while they cost money to initially buy, they don't actually add to your team value. You can see here that the 2 teams are slightly different team values because of the dedicated fans differences, and so you will actually pick up inducements money if you go heavily into dedicated fans and then play into people who haven't spent anything on dedicated fans. So let's go and have a quick look at 2 different rosters. We'll look at roster 1 here first of all, and this is probably my personal favourite, which is all of the strength things. So we've got 1 troll, we've got 6 black orcs, and then we've got 4 goblins. We've got 5 dedicated fans, so we're generating a good chunk of money, and then we have 2 rerolls overall. Total cost of the team is 995, however the team value is 955, so maybe we're picking up some inducements straight out the gate. With the dedicated fans means you are generating more money. I think you then take this roster, we go to the 12th player straight away, we're looking to then pick up the apothecary, and we're also looking to pick up the reroll. I think I would probably go 12th player, 3rd reroll apothecary, or 12th player apothecary 3rd reroll, depending on what type of environment I'm in. I wouldn't bother with the cheerleaders and assistant coaches. They are really only filler once you've got all the core players on this team, and ideally you're looking to try and save up money in case a Black Orc gets injured, because if a Black Orc gets injured you're replacing it with a Goblin as a loner, and they just really aren't in any comparison. It's a little bit like the Lizard team from Blood Bowl 2. If you lose a Lizard you really struggle the following game, so try and hold your bank as high as possible so that you can account for any Black Orcs that get injured. Now we have a second roster, which is this one. The idea of this roster was to get you to 3 team rerolls because the team has absolutely no useful skills pretty much at the start of the game. So let's have the 3 team rerolls we can cover in shortfalls. That means we have to drop the troll, unfortunately, but for the troll we get an extra 2 goblins, so we've got players down to 12. We've only got 2 dedicated fans, so we're not generating very much money, but we do have that 3rd team reroll. I think at that point the first player I would be picking up on this team is the troll. That takes us to 13. Then I would go for the Apothecary after that. And if a player goblin dies, never mind. Where you've got slightly more goblins, you can probably look to score on one and save up those star player points, while then for a stat, while at the same time then fishing for doubles on another one. So you've got your sure hands ball carrier. Or you can skip that entirely because you've now got the third reroll, and you could just go sneaky git on one, stat on another, because you've got your third reroll. In the other roster build, I think you really do need to try and get a sure hands goblin straight away, because you're only on 2 rerolls, probably for about 5 or 6 games. Now we'll go and have a quick look at formations, and then we'll have a look at inducements. So formations are here. In Blood Bowl 3, they are saved for us, so we can now input formations and use them. Over here we've got a drop down which is offensive. I'll show you the defensive ones, and this is my start of drive offensive formation. Here the goblins are these 4 players here, which you can see highlighted with the green box. So my 4 goblins are spaced around the field. Wherever the ball goes, I can go and fetch it, and I can probably cover it with at least 1 more goblin. Notice I've only put 3 players on the line of scrimmage. They should just be matching up the 3 players your opponent has put there. And then the 4 remaining Black Orcs, these 4 here, are all here because we're really slow. We need to go and cover the ball and work out whether that's gone. If you want to play, if you're playing against a bashy team, and you think you can get away with committing slightly more to the line of scrimmage, then just look at this simple change here. It brings everything in a little bit. You're still protecting the goblins, and you're probably not too worried about a blitz. It lets you get a little bit more damage off because you've got 5 players on the line. I think you can get away with this against other high strength teams, but I would strongly avoid using this type of setup against any of the Elves. I've not done a offensive only 3 or 4 turn drive or 2 turn drive, because that's going to completely depend on what your opponent does, and ultimately you'll just probably be shoving one of the sidelines, and you'll work that out for yourselves. But we can now go on to defensive drives, and this is the start of half defensive drive. We've put the Troll and 2 Black Orcs on the line. If you've got some levels, the Black Orcs with the levels don't go on the line, and probably actually sit on the 7 and the 4 spaces because they're slightly harder to blitz. Those are your 2 best Black Orcs probably. We're looking to just sort of create a chevron here, so your opponent has to work hard to blitz. If you want to, you can drop these in slightly. Now that does make it slightly easier to get around the side for a goblin hit, but overall it's this sort of shape. This is the start of the half, because we don't care about conceding the sidelines, because if our opponent goes and charges down the sideline straight away and scores on turn 2, 3, 4, 5, we don't care. We can equalise by the end of the half. But this is not something that you would want to do other than probably in the first 2 or 3 turns. Now we'll go and have a look at something that is defending a lead. Same principle, we'll set the line of scrimmage up in the middle. It's not such a key strategy anymore to offset your line of scrimmage, and actually your line of scrimmage here is a strength 4, a strength 5 and a strength 4. That's really impacting the centre of the board, so don't offset your line of scrimmage when defending a lead. Now, key things here are twofold. Number 1, I've dropped the players back slightly because they're so slow, and number 2, I've put the Black Orcs here, and I've actually left goblins available to hit on both here and here. You might even drop these all back 1 more, because depending on the speed of your opponent, depends on how much space you've got to cover. You've got to consider the Black Orcs are only movement 4 and can only get back to here. So if we put them so further forward, your opponent might just run past you and you can't get there. So this spacing here, or this shape, is all about how fast your opponent is and how many turns are left on the clock. And it's okay to leave the goblins to get hit, because they should be trying to take pitch space rather than anything else, and we really want them to run into this area here, so then all of our players can then converge on it. We don't want them running down the sideline, because then we've only got 3 players remaining to defend, so all of these players are too slow to get over here, or on the other side across to there. I hope that's a short cover on something that's actually very complicated, but is useful and means you can set up with some confidence when you're playing Blood Bowl. Next thing we're going to look at is Inducements. Okay, so this is the Inducements phase. For Black Orcs, we'll be looking at two different things realistically. The star players, we have access here to Ripper, Bolgrot, Helmut Wolf, Morgan Thor, and Varag Ghoulchewer. Looking at these in terms of costing, Helmut Wolf is a very good cheap star player at 140k and has a very interesting skill that's been reworked in Blood Bowl 3, which is Pro. Pro means you can re-roll 1 d6 dice on a 3+. Now that's great for the kickback, so that means Helmut Wolf now is very reliable when he is fouling, because 2/3 of the time his kickback can be cancelled pretty much. When you've got a bit more money to spend, then we can look at Ripper Bolgrot at 250k, or Varag Ghoulchewer, who has had a strength increase versus Blood Bowl 2, and he's now strength 5. If you've got a hell of a lot of money to spend, then do consider Morgan Thor, because he is one of the most powerful star players in the whole game, because he's got Mighty Blow, not +1, but +2, so his ability to cause casualties and mayhem is absolutely massive. Now, other thing that you should be looking at when you're playing as this team really is bribes. Bribes normally cost teams 100k, but for this Black Orc team they only cost you 50k, and you should have skilled into Dirty Player and Sneaky Git, so bribes should be the very first thing you take on your team sheet. Once you've got a couple of bribes and you don't want to take a star player, think about a wizard, and then lean straight into star players. The only time you would ignore this advice and go to something else is mercenaries. If you don't have your full complement of Black Orcs, do look to upgrade, hire an extra Black Orc so you've got all of your key positional players on the field. Thank you very much for watching.
People often make the mistake of thinking that Blood Bowl
My name's
is a team
AndyDavo,
sport, but I'd say it's
I
more
also
like
stream
a
on
big,
Twitch. If you would
fun,
like to
filled
join,
meat grinder.
then come and say hello at AndyDavo Twitch TV /Twitch TV. The link will be in the description below. I appreciate you watching the video. Until the next one, thank you very much.